Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Strange Orphan Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Steinell. Glad to have you here. Guys, this week has just been brutal. It's been brutal. And if you haven't been paying attention, there's just a lot going on in the world right now. We've entered into that gray zone of, I don't know how I feel anymore. I don't like this. We've entered into that state of perpetually numb by current events. It's not good. It's not good for the heart. It's not good for the soul. It's not good for the psyche. And so I thought this week it might be a good time to talk about grief, which is not a very fun topic. It's sort of a bummery topic, but it's a bummery world right now. And I think it's probably the week to do it. I wanted to talk about grief because I think it's sort of consumed my life for the past 3 years. I've been dealing with grief like a termite infestation. You're like, is it gone yet? And then you see a few more and you're like, fuck. Tent the house. I am a house that was tented for grief. But also because grief is just everywhere right now. I feel like we have a high grief precipitation at the moment. We're like 90% grief. We're like 90% it's gonna grieve. So let's get into it. Grief. I wish I knew how to do sound effects. I don't know. I think just like trauma, there's different types of grief. Like there's big G grief and there's little G grief. Like big G grief is like children in Pikachu hats getting taken by ice. Like that's big G grief. Big G grief is like my family doesn't like me. Like that's a heavy hitter. And then there's little G grief, which I think is more daily morass we're all kind of wading through at the moment, which is like, I don't know. I can't buy dark chocolate without like taking money out of my Roth IRA, or like going to the grocery store is like a game of, do I need it? I don't cook with pepper anymore. I ran out, so I'm just gonna leave it. $13 pepper. We'll meet again someday, maybe. I don't know. I also wanted to talk about grief because as someone who has lived abroad, as someone who's lived in Europe for 3 years, I think it's... As someone who's lived abroad, I just have like such a really interesting opinion on the world. And I feel like I have such a great perspective on America. Who is that? I think Americans seem to have like an aversion to full-frontal grief. Like, we don't like to acknowledge grief dead on. We want to just like poke it with a stick so it leaves faster, you know? Americans like to take in their grief through controlled vehicles, like through art or literature or music or like exploitation television shows to like vicariously air out the wound, right? Like, let me avoid my own feelings by watching someone eat the insides of their couch for 30 minutes. Like, sure, that's how some of us want to handle our emotions. And then when we do grieve, it's like done in secret, in private, with shame, shrouded in shame. Like, I think Americans handle grief the way they would approach pornography. It's like done alone in a car in a parking lot behind a 7-Eleven. And no one knows about it. And then they come home to their family feeling better. I don't know that person. I just think Americans don't really know what to do with our grief. Like we're like grief constipated. And I have this theory that America doesn't like grief because it's not a productive emotion. Like, grief takes you out of the day. Grief is not something you can pencil in and knock off. It's like you don't know when you're coming back from that. And who wants to commit to that, right? Like, we just want to get back into that Starbucks drive-through and get our giant coffee and not feel our feelings, and then come home to a giant bottle of wine. And then fall apart, in a dressing room a week later, or in a midday screening of Hamnet in the dark, where feelings should be felt. So yeah, I don't know. But I think we need to get more comfortable talking about grief, because it's definitely in the air. And it's definitely I'm seeing it be more of a trend. I'm seeing it as more of a trend for the mood board of 2026. It turns out grieving is less intuitive than you think. You can do it wrong. And I know this because I did. I did it way wrong by not doing it at all. So here's the story. It's incredibly embarrassing, but I feel like it serves a point for this purpose. I estranged from my family, like right before COVID. And then the plague hit. And while everyone was sort of off with their family bacon banana bread, I was like existing on my own as a new family of one. I was like alone, untethered, in the great abyss, in the void. Who wants to deal with that? And because estrangement is this sort of awful, open-ended cemetery where the ghosts just roam around, you're left with an unclosed door to the unresolved past, right? Like, how do you grieve people who are still alive? It's a very perplexing place to be. So I didn't. Instead, I just dumped all of my belongings into the trash and moved to London. I moved to a different country, thinking that, I don't know what I was thinking. I literally started, like, I threw things in bins and left them in the alley behind my house. Just like bins filled with like blankets and books, just pushed them out of the street. And I'd watch joggers like run by and like have to dodge them. And I'm like, take it. I don't need it. Where I'm going, like a person joining a cult. You put someone in isolation in COVID, and you're gonna get wild ideas. It didn't help that I was also like really into manifestation at the time. I was really into manifesting, so I thought I could just like mood board my way out of deep trauma, which I don't think anyone's ever said that that's possible. I found a man on the internet named Barry to smuggle my dog into the UK. No, like maybe he was vetted by like one fake looking blog post, and I was like, yep, wired him money. After some like very tenuous, like unclear text messages, just wired him more money than I'm willing to say to the public because it's embarrassing. It's delusional. But Barry was great. Like, I would recommend Barry if you have to get your dog into the UK. And then I just like lived in Airbnbs, slept on beds that smelled like the sheets of 1,000 cheeks, and convinced myself that that was a better move than staying in Los Angeles. And then I wandered around British department stores buying home goods. And yeah, and then later on I did some research on it, and it turns out like, no, there is such a thing as like mania fueled grief. It's apparently one of the stages of grief. But no one tells you this. Except for the people who wrote those books. But I didn't read them in time. But I am the prime example of how you should not approach grief. I am what to do to prolong to prolong the experience of grief. Completely delusional. I was like trying to make myself into like a crazy woman who was having a permanent tea party. I was trying to give myself the childhood I didn't get, really. Oh, it's so sad when you really break it down. But I'm fine now. I just burst into tears. But I get why we don't like grief, and I get why we go to great lengths to avoid it. I think where I went wrong was thinking that grief was like this detour that I could circumvent, when in reality, grief isn't the detour. Grief is the main route. We just don't want that to be the case. We just want to go faster. We want a faster route. And this is the one you got. This week I read an article about this ice skater who just made it into the Olympics. His name is Maxim Namov. I could be saying that very wrong, so I apologize. He's a U.S. figure skater who just got onto the Olympic team. He's going to be skating in Milan next week. And he lost both of his parents in that devastating plane crash that collided with an Army Black Hawk. It killed like 28 members of the skating community. Like there were a bunch of ice skaters on that plane. So devastating, so difficult I can't imagine having to overcome such a thing. And only a year later, he's now skated into the Olympics. And so I looked at his story, and actually his direct quote was, "All I wanted to do in that moment was lay in my bed and rot." And it was a moment that I knew the complete opposite of that was the path. I have a feeling that he didn't make the Olympics because he white-knuckled his grief or ignored it or stuffed it down like a sausage roll in Victoria Park, but because he moved through it and he used it to alchemize his pain into something more purposeful. He saw his grief as the way, the only way forward. Like how we grieve can determine how long we're there. If you attach an empowering story to your grief, like I'm going to get through this, I'm going to transmute it, and I'm going to use it to honor my parents as he did, that's way different than feeling like you're powerless in this situation. It's hard when you don't know what to make of your grief. He's a really great example of how the stories we tell ourselves are vital. If we don't attach a positive story to our grief, it's hard to get out from underneath it. It becomes this thing that just stifles us. If we run from our grief, it's even worse. Had he decided to pack up his apartment and move to another country, sell all his belongings instead of training and dealing with his feelings and moving through the pain, would he have made the Olympics? I don't know. But I think for the sake of this argument, I will go with no. Probably not. Instinctively knew that it was the feeling that had to change and move in his body, not his address. It's also a testimony to the power of community in times of grief, because I think when we isolate ourselves and when we process grief on our own, it sort of festers and it becomes calcified in us. It's this problem that we've battled. But when you deal with grief with community and with other people, it becomes an energy that you release. It's so funny. Our culture is so obsessed with optimization and becoming better and advance. And it's like, we'd probably just get a lot farther with like a really good cry. I can see now that my intrepid attempts to avoid my grief by going to a different country were really just attempts to outrun the deeply uncomfortable and the deeply painful. The thing about grief is that it also brings up truths that you maybe didn't want to see at the time. Like, I think instinctively I knew that I wasn't just grieving the loss of my family. I was grieving the loss of a time period of a childhood. I was trying to keep a door open that was shutting quickly. And there were things from that time period that I still hadn't gotten that I deeply wanted. It meant accepting the reality that I now had to become my own parent, that I now had to become an adult, that I now had to be responsible. You can be grieving nostalgia that isn't there. that you thought was there. You could be grieving realities that are so painful because you had believed there was love there all along when there wasn't. Like, grief becomes this Russian doll of grief. You're just unpacking more and more of it. I feel like my grief had grief. And then when you finally deal with it, it's exhausting. It's physically painful. Like, physically on the body, grief can be brutal. That's why I give this ice skater so much credit. Like, grief is exhausting. I felt like a down pillow with all the feathers beat out when I finally let grief have its way with me. I felt like a donkey carrying bags of sand up a hill. It's tiring. It wears you out. I still feel like a donkey, but for different reasons. I always thought facing my grief would completely destroy me. And it actually wound up being the opposite outcome. Like, I wish someone had explained this to me sooner. Facing my grief showed me my love, which sounds like a bizarre conundrum. Is that the right word? Which sounds like a bizarre, perplexing concept. We think we've survived things by our strength and our grit and our determination and our fight. And that's not always the case. Like, I survived my home because of my love for my parents, that I had this delusional belief that they would just change because I projected my love onto them. It was my love being reflected in the dark. And it's stunning the capacity we have to love people who don't love us back. But that love is what you find as the baseline beneath all the grief. This is why people say, like, love and grief are intertwined. You can't love someone and not feel the grief of eventually losing them. But you can't have grief without there having been love there to begin with. I like this quote Tolstoy wrote in Anna Karenina. He writes, "Grief and joy were alike, outside all the ordinary conditions of life. They were loopholes, as it were, in that ordinary life through which there came glimpses of something sublime. And in that contemplation of this sublime something, the soul was exalted to inconceivable heights, of which it had before had no conception, which reason lagged behind, unable to keep up with it." I think love and grief are like apertures into these higher realms that are really running the show here on Earth. And when we don't acknowledge them, we become a little less human or delusional. We definitely don't make the Olympics. I realize this essay on grief is much like grief in that I haven't been able to control it very well, and it's all over the place. But I think that's because it's almost easier to explain what grief is not than what grief is. Like, grief isn't something to overcome with big plans or intrepid endeavors. Grief isn't something to approach like a stoic war general unless you want ulcers and fatty liver disease and no friends. Then go for it. Grief is not something to wait out and hope it just changes on its own. Grief itself is the way through. It's essential to being human. It's as essential as coffee and love. And so if you're feeling grief, either big G or little g, I think that means you're profoundly human. And that's a good thing. You don't want to lose that. And you don't want to calcify yourself at this stage. Not yet. So try to feel it all without disrupting your day. Spend the afternoon in an empty screening of Hamnet. That's a good way to get it out. But yeah, the world is tough right now. The only advice I can give is to just stay profoundly human for as long as you can. Feel it all. All right, I think that's it for this week. Thanks for stopping by. Take care of each other.